Today we're going to be talking to Dr. David Hamilton, who is a best-selling author of 7 books published by Hay House. We're going to be talking about how we can use the power of the mind to create more health and happiness in our life and how we can use it to heal our body. David, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because I believe that you used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, is that right?
Yeah, I worked for a big drugs company called AstraZeneca.
Okay.
And I did a PhD in organic chemistry, which organic chemistry really is the chemistry of building molecules. And it's funny when you say organic, thinking of food and stuff, and then you end up working in the drugs company.
Yeah.
But the term organic chemistry actually means using carbons, hydrogens, nitrogens, and things like that to build molecules. And the natural progression for a person with a PhD in that is into a big pharmaceutical company building medicines, either that or into academia as a professor, which I had an option of. But so I ended up in a big drugs company, literally building the skeleton molecules that became the medicines themselves. But what I do now is completely different because, ironically, working in a drugs company, my main research interest in my own time became the power of the mind.
Yeah. So what happened? How did you get here?
Well, it's like, see, before I went into the pharmaceutical industry, I had a strong interest in, mind, body science, positivity, just because I grew up in an environment where my mum had experienced postnatal depression when I was a child, from the birth of my youngest sister. And my mum got through years in that by using affirmations, positive affirmations and meditation tapes as coping strategies. So I grew up in an environment hearing my mum say things like, I can do it, it's all in the mind, it's the thought that counts, and pumping her fist, and that was a coping strategy for some of the difficult moments. Yeah. So when I entered the pharmaceutical industry, when I first started understanding the process of developing a drug. I mean, before you go into pharmaceutical industry, as a PhD student, you assume that you just stick a few atoms together like we do in the lab, and then you have a medicine. But it's a 7-year process, really, from lab to marketing. And you get to find out about drug trials. And it was so interesting to me to learn just the staggering amount of people who make improvements on placebos in drug trials. And sometimes there's hardly any difference between the drug and the placebo. And that was just so captivating for me that, that because I already had an interest in the field. So when after 4 years, I thought, my passion is to research, write books on this stuff and to teach, to educate people.
Yeah. So you really have a lot of education and belief in the power of the placebo. So from your background, so can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yeah,
well, don't understand the placebo.
Yeah, well, it's really harnessing, I guess, that the mechanism, the route by which your thinking turns into chemistry in the body. Because so I'm a trained chemist, but I often use in talks and workshops an example. I lead sometimes with everyone's a chemist, and how I explain that is. If you were to think of someone or something that causes you stress, then the brain begins to produce the chemistry of stress. Yeah. So you produce, elevate levels, norepinephrine, and you produce more adrenaline and cortisol in the body. Yeah. And if you consistently think in that way, so you start to build up in the blood vessels things like free radicals and inflammation, which are the chemical precursors to what eventually becomes cardiovascular disease, stress-induced or dietary-induced. And bear in mind, this is stuff you're doing in your mind.
Yeah.
This is not stuff you're physically doing, this is stuff you're thinking. And yet you're producing chemistry in the brain, you're even changing, in it, net effect of that is a constriction in the arteries, right? And you're doing all this in your head. So the opposite side, let's say, for example, you learn to dominate your thinking with thoughts of affection. You dominate parts of your day just thinking of people that you care about, people you love about, and reminiscing on times when you feel warm and connected to them. Yeah. Then what happens in the brain is you produce oxytocin, and you produce dopamine and serotonin, the classic neurotransmitters. But oxytocin in particular, it's also produced in your blood vessels. And amazingly what it does is it acts like a little sweeping brush. There's a technical scientific term. but it acts like a wee sweeping brush, and it sweeps your arteries out of these things called free radicals and inflammation, the precursors to cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
And what it also does is it triggers a little chain reaction that causes your blood vessels to go like that and expand in size. And that's if you consistently think in that way. So bear in mind you're doing this in your mind. So here we have a black and white division here between if you wanted to cause the build-up of stress chemicals in your blood vessels, you could start thinking of stuff that bugged you, that annoyed you, or if you wanted to change the chemical composition of your blood vessels and expand them, then you could think of people that you love and care about. And what we're learning simply here is I could switch this mechanism on or that mechanism on in my body by changing where I focus my mind. So I often use that as examples that there's so many different effects in the body when you position your mind in a certain way, when you think in a certain way. And if you understand what these individual effects are, then you can literally activate and deactivate things in the body just by changing your mind. And so when I say we're all chemists, it's just a lovely way to give you faith in yourself that you're doing it all the time. You just don't notice that you're doing it all the time.
It's incredible how powerful our minds are and how little credit we give them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the oxytocin, that can reduce inflammation, is that right?
Yeah. Well, one of the pieces of research in oxytocin was looking at the way in which cardiovascular disease forms, and one of the things they did, they took immune cells and they took cells from the blood vessels, scientists in a lab, and they subjected them to stress in the lab. Now, the stress was meant to simulate the same conditions as lifestyle stress, dietary, you're eating too many of the foods that are not so great for us, or even mental and emotional stress. Ultimately, it's the same chemistry that eventually gets produced. And what they found is high levels of free radicals and inflammation. Right? So they did the experiment again, but this time in the presence of some oxytocin. The same oxytocin you produce when you're thinking thoughts of affection, kindness, compassion, even inspiration, when you hug people, all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And what they found is, depending on the type of cell, there was massive reductions in free radicals and massive reductions in inflammation. In fact, inflammation reduced by up to 57%, depending on the type of cell they used. Okay. And I'm talking about immune cells, and I'm also talking about blood cells from the blood, vascular cells. So substantial, considerable results. The kind of things comparable to what pharmaceutical drugs we've been looking to achieve.
Okay, so I just think that's amazing. So the key would be to, if you're finding something stressful or irritating, then try and shift your thoughts to a more loving, more kind, compassionate point of view or thought. Or maybe go back to thinking about the dog that you love, or your child, or your husband, wife, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And like all things, Polly, these things take practice, and it's difficult at first if you've not practiced in it. Yeah. But it's like anything. I often say to people, if you want to be Olympic champion, you don't go to the gym once.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes training.
It's consistency of practice. Yeah. So when you consistently practice these kind of things, then your capacity to shift from stress to affection and compassion becomes improved. And there's different meditation techniques and your little techniques where you write things down and stuff that help you to get there faster.
Okay.
Especially if the same thought keeps coming up and bugging you all the time. There's different strategies for that. Okay. But the more you practice the changing your mind, the faster it becomes and the easier it is for you.
So would it be helpful to maybe, if say you have a negative thought about yourself and you want to transform that to something that's more loving and to transform into a relationship of self-love, to write the negative thought down and then counter that with a positive affirmation about yourself? Would that help to sort of rewire your brain?
Absolutely, yeah. I use things like that. Other things that I work on personally as well is, I use meditation. I mean, there's so many different forms of meditation, but one of the forms that I use is the Tibetan Buddhist loving kindness.
Yeah, I love that one.
When we start... I tweak it a bit and I say, I am filled with loving kindness. Yeah. I am well, peaceful and at ease, happy, and I am free of suffering 3 times, and then we think of someone we love.
Yeah.
And we say, may, thinking of this person, be filled with love and kindness, be well, peaceful and ease, happy, free of suffering 3 times. Then we do the same for a neutral person, someone, a stressed person, difficult, someone who causes us in the present or in the past.
Yeah.
And then we project it to the whole world. So may everyone in the world be filled with love and kindness, may they be well, peaceful and at ease, happy, free of suffering. So I do that. But what I also find immensely useful, and I teach this quite a bit now, is forgiveness processes. And I mean forgiveness of other people and also forgiveness of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because for many people, what underlies stuff that keeps coming back up all the time is either they're holding on to something that's difficult to let go of from the past about something that happened, or even an attitude of mind about themselves. And there's, forgiveness work that's been done, that's been applied to people who've lost loved ones through acts of violence or terrorism, right down to what they consider ordinary, everyday hurts with an intermediary bit type of person who's been betrayed. So the whole spectrum of hurts. And they found this type of process is immensely effective. And I use things like that on myself. Yeah. Also to diffuse negative thinking about stuff, but also I in workshops I've started teaching that quite a lot now, because it's so important, and I think we don't realise how important it is, and we also think it's very difficult to do. But actually, when you go through a process and you do it, say once a week for 6 weeks, the same thing, it gets easier and easier and easier.
And I heard the other day that actually it takes, I think, 61 days. Or 66 days. 66 to form a habit, not 21.
Yeah, well, actually, it varies from person to person. Okay. When you read statistics, all of these statistics, they're averaged out over a number of people. And what you get is you get some people who rewire the brain very quickly, who put in the work consistently, and other people who don't consistently do the work. When you do studies, as you lump everyone together, the average is 66 or the average is 21, depending on the study.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that it takes 66 days. If you really put the work in, you can do it in a fortnight.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you don't, it'll take you 6 years.
Yeah, of course.
And that's why some people never break habits, but other people do it in a week or 2.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on people's personality type. Like I'm a quick start kind of person. I don't read the instructions on how to put something together. I just get started, and I don't read the instructions when I get stuck.
Yeah. I'm the same. I do it in reverse.
Yeah, but I'm also quite stubborn, so I want to work it out by myself. And with kindness, I know you've written a lot about kindness and why it's so good for you. Is that also because of the oxytocin as well, or is there other sort of components to it?
Yeah, well, when I talk about being good for you, I talk a lot about the cardiovascular benefits of the heart.
Yeah.
And so I've written a lot on how oxytocin affects the heart and affects the nervous system, all those kind of things. So kindness is very good if you're consistently kind.
Yeah.
Which really starts out in your own heart, meaning you have to have an attitude where you understand it's important to be kind.
Yeah.
For everyone and for yourself, and then you're more likely to be consistent with your acts of kindness, and then it has massive cardiovascular benefits. Okay. Very good for the health of your heart, blood pressure, all these inflammation, all these things. Yeah. But secondly, it makes you feel happier, and thirdly, it makes you feel connected.
Yeah.
I think what lies at the heart of one of the basic human needs that most people are completely unaware of is the need to feel connected. It's the need to belong, the need to feel connected. And the fear of losing connection is what drives a lot of people's behaviour, in life. A lot of people's negative behaviour in life is this underlying fear. So people many people don't even show up in life as their authentic selves because they're afraid of being vulnerable enough to show themselves in case other people won't like them. And then they'll lose this connection. And what's driving it deeply is this loss of connection, this fear of I won't belong, I won't be bonded and connected, because it's the genes that are associated with connection in the human genome are almost 500 million years old. And they're present right across the warm-blooded animal kingdom. So they're vital, and it's the oxytocin and associated genes that are social glue that keep us together. Now, when a person shows consistent kindness, what you get is this connection with other people. because you make bonds through kindness and compassion. Then that boosts the oxytocin. It's good for the heart, but it makes you feel not only happier, but it fills a basic human need of making you feel connected and part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, which I think is really important because, when you don't feel connected and you don't feel supported by the universe, you just feel very lonely, and it can be a lonely place.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
presumably that kindness starts with yourself in the form of self-love.
Yeah, and I'm for the first time in my life, I'm beginning to understand this, and I say the first time in my life because for the last year or so or more, I've been working on a book all about self-love.
Yeah.
And we before we started this interview, we had a brief conversation about this, and I had to get a year extension at least on the book
Yeah.
because I couldn't have a deadline because my first attempt at the book just wasn't right because I had to learn self-love for myself, and I had to understand what it is, and it's the hardest work I've ever had to do on myself is learn how to love myself. And so having a deadline for writing a book on self-love doesn't work because it's like saying you will love yourself by, my deadline was the 6th of July 2013. You will love yourself by the 6th of July.
Yeah.
Ain't going to happen.
It's pretty strict.
So when the pressure's off, so I'm learning how to be kind to myself, how to value myself, but ultimately how to feel worthwhile, how to really develop self-worth, which goes a wee bit beyond just the things we tell us in our heads. It's how we actually feel on the inside, and that's what I've been working on.
I'm really looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, so am I. I'm looking forward to finishing it.
Well, absolutely, but I think one of the things I talk about a lot is self-love, because when we cultivate a relationship with ourselves where we know that we're worthwhile and we know that we deserve to put really good, clean, whole, nourishing foods into our body, then that's what we do. Whereas when we maybe don't respect our bodies or we don't feel like we're worthy, then we might go for the junk food, or we might not do the things that ultimately are in our best interest for ultimate health and well-being. So
Absolutely.
self-love, I feel, is really the foundation of all health and well-being, really.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
I wanted to talk to you also about visualization, because I first discovered you, it must have been, I don't know when your book was published, How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body, around 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
When I was first diagnosed with cancer. I think I was 24. And I just found the testimonials in particular, and also the evidence to suggest that your mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined, just really, really powerful. And that was really the foundation of my my visualization practice, and how I healed a large part of my lymphedema. It was one of the strategies that I used. So can you tell us a little bit more about why visualization works and why it's so effective?
Yeah, I think it works in a couple of ways. And one, first of all, it's a way of harnessing your intention, your willpower.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, is if you can harness your willpower by using a visualization to keep your mind focused on what you want, then first and foremost, that's an amazing thing. Whatever way you can harness your willpower, absolutely great. And then secondly, what I often share is examples and research that show that if you imagine something happening on a consistent basis to the brain, it's like it's really happening. For example, research at Harvard got volunteers to play 5 notes on a piano when they literally went plonk, 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 up and down a scale. And they did this 2 hours. Or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, having their brain scanned every day, and by the Friday the area of the brain connected to the finger muscles was substantially bigger than it was on the Monday. So neuroscientists often use the analogy that the brain is like a muscle. That if you train a muscle, the muscle gets bigger and stronger. Similarly, the brain is similar, but the brain changes its size in its areas much, much faster than your physical muscles. I mean, 5 days of doing that, the area of the brain connected to the finger muscles was about 30 to 40-fold bigger in volume in 5 days. If that happened to your physical muscles, a week of working out at the gym, and your arm would be so big you'd be trailing it along the ground like a gorilla.
That's not bad, is it? But actually, it's amazing, because for people who can't get out of bed, or maybe can't get out of the house, that's a really effective tool for them to imagine themselves maybe walking in nature, or walking in the woods, or going to the gym, and actually can help to build up some muscle by visualizing it.
Absolutely, because the key part of that study was when the group was compared, the group who played the piano notes were compared against the group imagining playing the piano notes, and the brain scans were identical. You couldn't tell the difference between those who physically played the notes versus those who'd imagined it. And so, in the context of visualization, lots of researchers are now saying, even mainstream academic researchers are saying, the difference between real, the line between real and imaginary when it comes down to the brain, the nervous system, is becoming ever so blurry. The difference between real and imaginary, so when I use this as evidence for visualization, what I'm suggesting is, on some level, the brain knows the body has, let's say, a trauma or an injury or sickness or something somewhere, right? But as you're imagining it disappearing, then on some level, the brain is processing something somewhere that says, well, this isn't here anymore, or it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So what I think happens is, just like you talked about the 66 days to build up a habit, or to break a habit, on some level, the area of the brain saying I'm well now is bigger than the area of the brain that says it's sick. And if the lines between real and imaginary are getting blurred, then eventually maybe you get a little tipping point that moves the body from illness into wellness. And I just use that. There's no direct evidence of that, because scientists in the lab haven't actually tested the mechanism yet. Mechanism meaning how it works. But that's how I understand it, based on the fact that so many people use it. And I've had conversations with MDs, with consultants who all some people come along to my workshop, some consultants and MDs come along to get information on the mind-body connection, because they've never really heard it before, having been immersed in their own field for so long. And not realising that this area of science is progressing so fast. But this is how I explain, my understanding is, I think this is what's going on.
Well, I'm so happy that you're doing this work, because I really feel that more medical professionals need to understand the connection between the mind and the body, because it is so incredibly powerful, and unfortunately not enough people know about it. And I think the more the better. So if we can spread this message, then it's absolutely worthwhile for everybody. So for people that are starting out with visualization, that have never done it before, what would be your top tip or advice to them?
The simplest thing to imagine for, and you can apply this to any physical or even emotional thing, is you imagine something in your body or in your mind moving from illness into wellness, right?
Okay.
I to we, I to W, illness into wellness. Right? And whether you're a visual person, some people are very visual, see in high definition, most people don't. However you imagine, you are doing it right. Right? You can only do visualization right. I prefer the word imagine to visualize, because you can only, as long as your intention is pointed from illness going into wellness, you are doing it right. Whether you see with clarity, or whether you just get a vague sense, or you can't see anything at all, but you're in your imagination, you think feel it's going to wellness. However you do it, you're doing it right. As long as you move illness into wellness. So, for example, a person with classic anti-cancer visualization is the tumours getting smaller and smaller and smaller until they disappear. Whether that's using chemo drugs and imagining the drugs like piranha fish nibbling away until the tumours disappear, or whether that's radiotherapies, bolts of lightning, or whether they're just imagining the tumours made of ice and they're melting, and then they're even mopping up the water and wringing it outside of the body to take it out of the body at the end. Whatever way they do it, people for depression might imagine feeling broken. There's a classic depression visualization I've been sharing for years, is the brokenness, that you imagine that as broken shards of a mirror, and you sweep the shards up, put them in a pot, put fire underneath the pot, melt the mirrors until it's liquid silver, then pour it into a fresh mirror, perhaps a heart-shaped mirror, and put cold air on it to dry it, and what you've done is you've moved from brokenness to wholeness. You've made yourself whole again. It's the same technique, illness into wellness. However you do illness into wellness, you're doing it right. Even if you turn the colour black into the colour white, whatever you do, symbols, the brain at the end of the day doesn't really need to know whether you've got the medical shapes right or not. It's just whether your intention is turning illness into wellness. It works purely symbolically. However you do it, you're doing it right, as long as your mind is focused towards wellness.
So you can't get it wrong, because one of the things I find a lot of people that I speak to, they're very hung up on the details, and they feel like they need to know every single last thing. I mean, and honestly, it doesn't always matter. So it is very much a case of the way that you're doing it is right, and trust your own instincts as well.
Yeah, because the getting hung up and thinking you're doing it wrong creates stress.
The mind.
Yeah, and it's all in the sense that's all in the mind, because it creates stress.
Yeah.
And then you think, I'm doing this wrong, and then what happens is the visualization is of little use. In fact, it can go against you because you're creating more stress in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you acknowledge that however you do it, you can only do it right. As long as your mind is pointed towards wellness. As long as your mind is pointed towards wellness, you can only do it right.
Yeah. I remember when I was using visualization for my lymphedema in my leg, and I used to imagine like a little mini-me going in through my ear and working my way down to my leg, and I met all my mates down in my leg, and there was just loads of fluid and everything, and I had a little hoover, and we'd hoover it all up, and then we'd get in this like white minivan, and we'd drive down to my toes, and then we'd lift off the cap of my toe, and it would all pour out into the universe.
Yeah, love it.
Used for something, really meaningful in the Earth's core. So that means, and actually, it was a great visualization for me, and I just made that up, and it works. Along with other things that I did as well, changing my diet and meditation and what have you. So I'm a big fan of visualization, and I always talk about your books because I think they're fab. So with your experience in the pharmaceutical industry, my last question to you is, how do you feel about what people now call alternative treatment with regards to, say, acupuncture and homeopathy and things that maybe the conventional side of things don't always really advocate or necessarily promote?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of alternatives. I like the concept of, integrative medicine.
Me too.
Taking the best of everything and adding it all together, because some things work best for some people and other things work best for other people, and a lot of that depends on what you believe and your own mindset and your, and I say, take the best of everything. When I talk about visualization, I'm not saying to people, use your mind instead of taking medicines or therapy, but use your mind as well as.
Well, exactly.
Because for years, it was always this debate, mainstream or alternative, and then even when it came to diet, and exercise, and what we're forgetting is you're not doing one or the other. When you choose to start eating better, you're using diet as well as other things. When you exercise, you're doing exercise as well as other things. Mm-hmm. So when you come to use the mind, it's something to do as well as, but the as well as, I think the mind exerts a considerable effect upon the overall health and condition. But if we just do that as well as, then great. So with alternatives, I'm a big fan. I've had acupuncture. I do meditation. I certainly advocate the best of everything. Yeah. Not necessarily anything is wrong, because it depends on the person and the advice that they get.
It doesn't have to be exclusive. I think that's one of the things I feel people feel, because some medical professionals are a little bit disparaging of alternative treatments, so they feel like they have to choose one or the other. But I've tried a lot of different things in the last sort of 8 years, and I've now reached a point where I have a very integrative approach, where I use a little bit of conventional because sometimes I have to, and other times, and at the same time rather, I have a holistic doctor who supplies me with reishi, which is a mushroom powder, which is really supportive of my body against cancer. But I also use acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, along with a few other things, and for me that works.
Yeah, and it's taking the best of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think some medical professionals, I guess they feel that they're being professionally responsible, only talking about the mainstream. But sometimes it's not because they don't believe in the alternatives; it's they don't really know any of the evidence.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or they assume that some of the skepticism out there is actually a sum conclusion of every piece of individual person's experience, which is absolutely not.
No, I agree.
So for me, it's integrating all the worlds together and saying, look, there's really good stuff everywhere. There's good stuff in conventional medicine, there's good stuff in alternatives, there's good stuff that we can do for ourselves, but take the best of everything and go with where you feel, works for you.
And also trust your instincts. I think that's another thing that people are also a little bit afraid to do, and maybe even not. I'm not suggesting go against your doctor, but do what you feel is right for you. Because many people do things sort of because they feel like they should, rather than do what they want to do. So I'd always encourage that as well.
And that brings you back to self-love.
Yes, absolutely. We love a bit of self-love.
And you might notice my cup.
Ah! I love you too, David. Thank you so much for this amazing interview.
It's been my
really
pleasure.
Insightful. So thanks for taking the time with us today.
That's been great. Thank you.
All right. Listen, David, just before you go, tell us where people can find you, because on my blog I will put your links to your website and your books. But if they're watching it on YouTube, where can they find you?
My website is drdavidhamilton.com. That's DR for drdavidhamilton.com.
Yeah.
Facebook.com, it's David R. Hamilton PhD. And I think David Hamilton PhD, I think that's my YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
And then Twitter is Dr. Hamilton.
Dr. Hamilton, I like it. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, David. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Polly. It's been great chatting with you.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.